we do have some questions from students that have been submitted in advance, but the first thing I will do is give you an opportunity, Jane, to introduce yourself to everybody who's listening, and then we'll move on to questions from there. Thank you.
So how much time do I have for the introduction remarks?
Keep them brief, but you know, it's an open-ended kind of thing, whatever you feel is necessary.
Okay, appreciate it. I'm Jane Thornthwaite, the now BC Liberal candidate for North Vancouver Seymour. I have been the MLA for 11 years and I'm seeking re-election. But before I start anything, what I'd like to do is obviously apologize to you all, as well as I have to Bowen on my remarks that were from an event actually over a month ago. And I'd just like to say that they were stupid and insensitive, and I'm embarrassed about it. And it just doesn't reflect who I am, and certainly doesn't reflect my record. I have reached out to Bowen, and I did get a text back that she got it, my message. She didn't pick up, but I did. And I just wanted to reiterate that I'm sorry. And yeah, there's no one more disappointed in my words than me. And what's being said online is not me. So I've been working hard, as you all know, for my career on representing people that are perhaps less disadvantaged than, and the example would be obviously LGBTQ people. I've spoken out on numerous occasions, including the legislature, and definitely support their issues. And I was paramount actually in the legislature of getting SOGI policies in school, as well as changing the Human Rights Code to include gender identity and gender expression. So I do have a good record in that. Some of you might have seen the documentary Crow's Transformation. It was actually a documentary on the transformation of a young woman into a man. And she was a model. Now he's a model, and very successful model. And I was in that documentary, indicating my support for the LGBTQ community. So I think my record is pretty clear with regards to my support. And if you do follow what goes on in the legislature, you know that I speak out all the time. The other thing that I have been focusing a lot on, and you would know this because we've met many, many times, is on the mental health file, mental health and addictions. Even before I was elected as opposition, I had done a lot in child and youth mental health when I was in government. But now that I'm in opposition, I'm the opposition critic for mental health and addiction, and have done a lot of work on improving services in schools. I was not single-handedly, but certainly with the Minister of Health at the time, advocating for Foundry. And now there's this government, this new government, has carried on in that work. And I think there is about 19 foundries province-wide, which I'm very, very happy about. And we have one here in North Van, which I advocated for and delivered. The other thing regarding mental health that I've been able to deliver in North Vancouver is the Hope Center, as well as specifically the third floor devoted to children and youth, which when they originally had planned the Hope Center, they had not thought about what they were going to be doing with that third floor, and I advocated for that. And then more recently, I've also been speaking out and an advocate for sexual assault victims. Someone very near to me was violently raped, and I went to her defense and actually arranged for a meeting for her to meet with the Minister of Education and talk about consent in schools. And quite frankly, we need to get courses in schools to talk about consent in elementary school. It's too late in high school. I've spoken out about that quite a bit in the House, as well as improving the services for sexual assault victims. Right now, if a woman is raped and shows up at Lionsgate Hospital, she is sent away, often at her own expense, to Vancouver General Hospital, because the forensic services, rape kits, are, as well as the staff, are not available at Lionsgate Hospital. So I have been advocating for services, 24/7 services on the North Shore, as well as all the other hospitals. 80% of the hospitals in British Columbia do not have these trained staff and do not have these kits available. So many times the people that arrive at the door are sent away. I find that unacceptable, and I've been advocating for it. And I was very, very pleased to see in the BC Liberal platform that that is actually a promise, a BC Liberal promise, that if we are elected, we are going to boost resources for sexual assault victims, as well as increase nurses and provide services so that sexual assault victims do not have to go through to get turned away and taken to another hospital. The other thing that I've been advocating strongly for with regards to sexual assault victims is I believe that judges, and for that matter, lawyers, defense lawyers, as well as Crown, need to understand sexual assault policy and the law better than they do now. So I do support Rona Ambrose's private members bill that she presented a few years ago federally for the Supreme Court judges, but we've got to do the same thing here in the province. And I've been talking to the Law Society and other groups to push that forward. So education on sexual assault policies for judges, I think, should be mandatory. Currently, it is not. And a lot of the problems that have occurred with the way that women are treated in the court, and they call it the second rape because it's horrible, and many people would not report just because of the way that they're treated in the court system. So I'm working for that, and those are basically the main things that I've been focusing on that are pertinent to things that you've mentioned in the past and future in past meetings. But just in summary, I obviously want to do better. I feel sorry, I feel bad with my remarks that were, a month or so ago. And I hope that I will work, I hope that you believe that. And I will continue to work to make things better for all women, and also specific issues pertaining to women in politics. I'm a woman in politics. I've had lots of crap thrown at me as well. So I know what it's like, and I know how hurtful it is. And I want to encourage anybody, any young woman, to put their name in the hat, to step up and run, because we need more women in politics to speak up for these issues, because if we don't, then the issues get kind of lost. So that's my commitment, and the other items that I mentioned is also my commitment. And any advice that you could have for me as far as helping me with that commitment would be very much appreciated.
Thank you, Jane, for the introduction. Just for folks joining us, I'm going to give you a brief overview of what we're doing here today. I just want to remind everybody that if you have a question for the candidate, you can ask the question in the question box feature. The questions are anonymous, and we will go through them as they appear. I also just want to highlight for everybody that this will be a respectful dialogue, and that inappropriate comments or speech will not be tolerated. We are going to be dealing with different topics of interest to students, and with regard to public policy, we've already touched on a couple of them. I am at this time going to offer a content warning because we've talked about a little bit about sexualized violence and the way that it interacts with the law. If this is something you're uncomfortable with, the conversation may continue to address that. and please just do whatever you need to do to feel comfortable and safe. So we will start with the first question that we have, and obviously we've touched on this quite a bit. But on Sunday, you said that you were committed to doing better moving forward. You've talked about some of the actions that you're going to take. What can we hope to see from you if you are reelected in terms of how you're going to fulfill that commitment kind of in a day-to-day, everyday life component? So not just, I guess what I would say is not just policy, but what are we going to do, what are all of us going to do to make politics a more respectful space for women and femmes?
Yeah, and that includes everyone as well, in all aspects of the political spectrum. And I think that it would be better, and this is one of the reasons why it's better to have women in politics, because we're more conciliatory. We are more, wanting to work together. Certainly, we have worked with the other side. I can tell you that one of my most accomplishments, my proudest moments of accomplishments, was actually working with Carol James. And I was chairing the Select Standing Committee for Children and Youth, and she was the vice chair. And together, as well as the other committee members, and just so that you know, the committees, this is a Select Standing Committee, so this is where the real work gets done. Question period is not getting the work done, but standing committees are very good, and I've been a member of a few of them in my political career. But in this particular case, it was Carol and I, as the chair and the vice chair, that got together and decided that we needed to do more for mental health for children and youth. And we did, and we came up with some suggestions on how we were going to do this. Certainly at the beginning, we thought this was going to be like a 6-month project, but as it turned out, it was a 1.5 years because we came up with a whole bunch of problems first, and then we came up with some solutions. And when we were in government, we adopted some of those solutions, and now that the NDP is in government, they had adopted some of those solutions. So I think that type of camaraderie and working together that Carol James and I had was really helpful. So I would want to emulate that with the more standing committees, so that the adversity with politics is reduced.
Great, thank you for the answer. So I guess one follow-up to that is, we understand that we live in a society where we are encouraged to talk down to other women in order to build ourselves up. What can we all do to commit to not doing that in the future? What can men do? What can women do? And how can we make sure that this is not a situation we have to face again?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, language, certainly I've reflected on this, language is really, really important. That we have to be conscious of our language before it comes out of our mouths. And that was one of my failures. But I think that, once these things are brought to light, that, and if the person is truly genuine, then they will, more or less think before you speak. Everybody makes mistakes. I've made mistakes. I made lots of mistakes in my personal life as well as my political life. But I think a conscious thinking about it will help to alleviate at least some of those mistakes.
Thank you. One last follow-up question to do with this topic anyway, although there may be others that come through the chat box. What would you say to any young woman who is considering going into politics herself, who may be reconsidering that decision in light of recent events?
Well, for sure. If you look at all of the comments online, against me for that matter, let alone, what I had said was totally not intended the way that it was interpreted. It's not me. I'm known as a champion for even mentoring women in politics, not just people that are running, or elected, but women that want to be part of the political process, either working for elected officials or volunteering on campaigns. So I think that's really, really important. And for me, I have a very young woman that is my staff, and I have a very young woman who is my campaign manager. So I think my record speaks for itself. I support young women, and I will continue to do so. I appreciate their point of view. I guess they kind of like mine too, because they're working with me. But I think it's good to have a mix of ages so that everybody gets the right perspective moving forward. And young people's issues are very, very important and cannot be ignored. And so I will continue to speak out in favor of getting more people in politics, more young people in politics, but also particularly women to step up.
Thank you. We've got some audience questions coming in now, so we can shift over to that. The first question that I see is what is your plan for making childcare more affordable and childcare educators more recognized economic and career-wise?
I think that's a really good point, and I was very pleased to see our platform that had a prominent childcare perspective. The BC Liberals have promised to bring in $10 a day daycare for families that earn $60,000 or less, and it goes up incrementally, but 20 for 93, I think it was, and then 120, it would be $30 a day. So there's a commitment there. It's like $2 billion of a commitment. There'll be a system, an efficient system, so that parents can do that online, and so they don't have to be on multiple waiting lists, which is always a problem. So the affordability of the childcare services is key. And there's also a commitment in the childcare platform with regards to training and increasing spots for early childhood educators for that exact reason. So I would encourage you to look at the whole platform. I've just given you some snippets, but it is a prominent part of our platform. And I actually was at Behaven Childcare Center down by the Capilano University residence earlier on in the campaign, watching Andrew Wilkinson make that announcement. So I encourage you to check out the platform that was just released today.
Great, thank you. I will let you know if the person who asked the question has any follow-ups. In the meantime, we see another question that says, I've seen you post things personally that are supportive of the queer community, and I appreciate that as a queer person. I do want to ask though, how do you react to the BC Liberals' position on the place of homophobia in politics and the continued candidacy of Laurie Thrones?
Well, I know that Andrew Wilkinson has been really clear that we have no room for homophobia in the party. And I don't know whether or not you've heard him speak, but he himself does have people from the LGBTQ community that are in his immediate family. So he does understand that. With regards to the Laurie Thrones issue, I don't agree with Laurie Thrones. I'm not, in support of some of his views, and I don't speak for him. So I just have to concentrate on, what I can do to make sure that those from the LGBTQ community are well supported, and supported not just from me, but from everybody in the legislature. I've got a pretty good record on that, and people have commented on that, and I'm probably one of the more progressive BC Liberals, if not the most, in the legislature, and my colleagues do appreciate my point of view. And as I said, when we were in government, we were able to do some significant legislation to improve to make sure that the Human Rights Code had gender identity and gender expression in it, but also it was our government that was responsible for getting all the SOGIs in schools. And that was a partnership with the ARC Foundation and the government. So I'm very proud of that work. Do we have more to do? Yes. I think education is key. I had Gina Lazarowicz, who is the filmmaker for Crow's Transformation, actually come to the legislature and do a showing for my caucus members. So everybody had seen, everybody that attended, which was well over half of our caucus. It was a night showing, so not everybody could make it, but it was pretty profound that we got a lot of our BC Liberal colleagues. So I think the number one thing for me that I will continue to do if reelected is to do more education and let people know. Because when I was in government, and I was the parliamentary secretary for child mental health and anti-bullying, one of the major segments of our population that suffers from bullying and obviously mental health and therefore addictions are the LGBTQ community. So we need to do way better in the schools and stop bullying and educate people that that this discrimination is wrong.
Thank you. We've got way more questions now all of a sudden. But I'm going to throw it to Josh for the first one, and then we'll field some more after that.
Sure, thank you, Grace. So for our next question, Jane, in your initial tweet responding to this controversy, there was no apology to Bowen or the public. You did 2 hours later. Why didn't you apologize initially? Did you not think at first that this would be something that should have been apologized for?
I totally agree with you. I was trying to put in a tweet and show my support for the for women. And for sure, the apology should have come first. So I rectified that. And the other thing that happened immediately, because I think that story came out, you know, at 10 o'clock at night or something. And I was in front of the global camera in the morning, the next morning. So we definitely reached out to get my message across that I was embarrassed and feel horrible and am sorry and apologize to you and obviously to Bowen. I had phoned her in the morning. So yes, it was not an oversight, but just yes, I rectified that and subsequently did that on the Global.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a follow-up on the question regarding early childhood education. Okay, so the question is, why not just integrate early childhood education into public education systems and recognize early childhood educators as educators in Commonwealth countries instead of essential service workers who are treated differently? What's the difficulty in doing so, and what has prevented it from happening so far?
Well, I don't think there's any difficulty. I think we're, you know, it sounds like a good idea, but I think there's a capacity issue. We need to, as already been mentioned, we need to get more people trained. And the other thing we need to do is encourage more people to go into that career, which I think is also an issue. But and then we need the spots for training. To get people trained. But I think that the first measure that at least the BC Liberals have said is we're trying to make it more affordable with this $10 a day daycare for families that make less than $60,000. So I think that's a good start. And I think that there's also a promise on number of spaces as well. I'm just trying to find it here. But yes, expand training and support for better qualified childcare workers. And the other thing, this was interesting, replace the Minister of State for Childcare with a full ministry to manage licensing, funding, and oversight. So I think that's an important addition so that we can get someone laser focused with the entire spectrum of childcare. but I'm certainly not adverse to it being in the public school system at all. But there are pretty good services in the private sector. As I said, I was at Behaven the other day, and supporting more spaces and not limiting it to less should be our priority, and that will include the private sector as well.
Great, thank you for that answer, Jane. Our next question is about unemployment and job creation. So in a mixed job update from StatsCan, 10,500 jobs were created in Vancouver, but there are more people looking for work, which has led to local unemployment climbing from 11% in July to over 12% in August. We're wondering how new graduates can be confident that they will get jobs in this market, as many of the industries that graduates would go into have been crushed by the pandemic.
Sorry.
Just a little bit more of a follow-up. And also noting that most of the jobs which have been created seem to be part-time jobs, and part-time jobs don't guarantee the same hours or the same security as full-time jobs. So this attendee is wondering what the government will do about this problem and how quickly we will be able to see results.
So again, an excellent question, Josh. I think this pandemic has exacerbated that. And we have committed, the BC Liberals have committed to a pandemic response to help small businesses. You've probably heard one of the campaign promises was to eliminate the PST for 1 year and increase it to 3% after the second year. This will help put more money in people's pockets, but also help small businesses survive. And as you know, small businesses are the economic generator and the job generators of our community. And specifically, you had mentioned, specific sectors. My daughter's in the tourism sector in CAP, and the tourism has been devastated. The hospitality industry has been devastated. So I think that the platform items that offer support for small businesses, the hospitality industry, the tourism industry, which are the ones that have been most hard hit, is good news and shows a commitment to get the economy back going and people back to work, and also supporting small businesses because I know where my office is in Lynn Valley Village. A lot of those small businesses are suffering because, well, in particular the hairdressers, they had to shut down, but yet they still had to pay their rent. And so they're suffering. If you talk to any of the tenants in the Lynn Valley Village, they're suffering. And I was advocating for them to get rent relief from the District of North Vancouver, because the District of North Vancouver is actually the landlord. But it's fortunate that, again, there was a rent relief promise in our platform to help small businesses, which will help employment and get people back to work, because I totally get that, unemployment is skyrocketed. So we need to have more opportunities for people to get back to work.
Thanks, Jane. Okay, I'm going to move on to another question now. Your party has committed to $58 million in additional funding for police safety, or for public safety, including hiring 200 additional police officers. Are the BC Liberals committed to finding alternatives to traditional policing in light of recent public policy discussions about repurposing police funding?
Yes, because that press release as well had the same, in addition to the 200 police officers across the province, we are committed to 100 more psychiatric social workers or nurses, and have committed to establishing more integrated mobile crisis response teams to respond to mental health related calls. Certainly, I've done a couple of ride-alongs actually with the North Vancouver RCMP as well as the Vancouver Police Department. And I specifically went on those ride-alongs to see what percentage of their day or their evening was spent on mental health calls. And it's significant, because if you can imagine, if they go, and this is what I was told, if they go to a mental health call, and if somebody is at risk of committing suicide or has mentioned that in the 911, then they are obligated to take people to hospital, and then they have to wait there for a physician to assess the individual. And that's lost time for the individual. It's lost time for the police to be doing other stuff that they should be doing. So that's why it's really, really important to bump up programs like these CAR 40s, which they have in Vancouver, Surrey, and Kamloops, I think it is, where there's actually psychiatric nurses or social workers that are actually riding along with the people, with the police, so to de-escalate the situation. Because if you got some guy coming in a uniform, that's frightful for some people. So at least the social workers and the psychiatric nurses will be plain clothes and try to de-escalate and go directly to the hospital if needed, and get the services there without having the police deal with those mental health calls. So I totally agree that we need to do that, and I've been advocating for that, actually. So I was pleased to see it in the platform.
Great, thank you. Give me 1 second, my screen's thing, there we go. Okay, so our next question is, hold on just a sec. Okay, so the next question for you is, what will the BC Liberals do to reduce the cost of housing?
Well, there is an entire housing portfolio, but I think one of the, again, in the platform, which was released this morning, and so I've just kind of flipped through it, but I think the number one thing that we have to do is reduce red tape to allow municipalities, or incentivize municipalities to build more housing, I think, and more diverse housing. Obviously not just single family homes, but condos, purpose-built rentals, stratas that are, townhomes, etc. We need more, particularly in North Vancouver, we need more variety of housing. The city, I think, has done a pretty good job of getting some purpose-built rentals. The district, maybe not so much. So it really does come down to the province working with municipalities. And I think that to incentivize municipalities to encourage housing being built is a very important step. I could just mention one thing as well. Strata insurance for those that do actually live in a strata. We're committed to reducing the sky high insurance in stratas. They've gone up exponentially over the last year.
Great, thank you. Our next question is, if re-elected, how will you advocate for CAPU and its students?
Well, I've always been an advocate for CAPU. As I said, 2 out of my 3 children have gone through CAPU. One of my accomplishments, in addition to the ones that I told you about with mental health, was the Capilano University Film School. That was one of the first things that I advocated for, and we did the big announcement, and that's great. So now we need to work on housing. Student housing, and there's a couple of plans that are in the works that your president Paul Dangerfield has let me know about, and I know that there's some that is projected to be up by the kennels. So I'm supporting that, and we were supporting that initiative when we were in government as well. So we've got to improve housing. And on-site housing, on-campus housing. The other issue is rapid transit. As you know, I was very paramount in getting 3 levels of government to fix the transportation mess that's at the foot of the cut there, and doing all the interchanges. So all that construction is because of my advocacy with 3 levels of government. But we need to do better on rapid transit and FIBS exchange. FIBS exchange needs to be fully funded. It was part originally of one of the 4 phases, but I've been told by the mayor that it is not funded at this point. So obviously, if I'm reelected, we're going to make sure that FIBS exchange is made safer and more modernized and is, you know, obviously appropriate to more buses. I was one of the original people that have been advocating for SkyTrain to the North Shore. Stefan Neuweller from SFU has published numerous studies, and he's gotten quite a bit of press in the North Shore News about his work with making sure that the entire region is connected with regards to either light rail or SkyTrain, etc. So as much as I support the directions that you know, out to UBC or out to Langley, I think that the North Shore needs more attention, and in fact, it's in our platform as well, is rapid transit to the North Shore. So that's something that I'm supporting. I would prefer, if it's rapid transit to the North Shore, that it's from the second Narrows end, not necessarily on that bridge, but on the second Narrows end, as opposed to the Lonsdale, because the Lonsdale has the C-bus and is relatively well serviced. But the District of North Van and the District of West Van is not well serviced in transit. So I'm a huge fan of CAPU. I've worked with them on numerous issues, and obviously I meet with the student union a lot, and I want to drive forward their issues. And I hear you, as the last discussion we had was more mental health supports in schools. And I'm an advocate for a foundry in post-secondary, and I would still be an advocate for the equivalent of a foundry at Capilano U, but we definitely need to get more mental health services in post-secondary. I think that's key, particularly during COVID, but it was before COVID.
Great, thank you for the response, Jane. Our next question comes from Shannon Patterson at CTV. I'm a reporter with CTV News, but I also live in the riding. Can you tell female voters in North Vancouver Seymour who are upset about the roast comments why they should still vote for you? And just to be clear, it'll air on CTV.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Yeah, no, I've said before, I am devastated. I apologize. I am so sorry. I've apologized to Bowen. I've apologized to you. It's, you know, not me. And everybody that knows me knows that I advocate for women's rights. I advocate for women in politics. Everybody knows that I have been a strong advocate within the BC Liberal Caucus on LGBTQ rights. I mentioned before, you know, with the SOGI policy as well, that is very important in schools. And I commit to doing better. And I definitely will commit to that, and would appreciate your help on how I can do better. But I'm not, those remarks were not me. So I appreciate the opportunity to clear that up.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Josh for the next question.
Thank you, Grace. For the next question, we have, if elected, will the BC Liberals freeze public sector budgets to make up for lost revenue from their promise to eliminate the PST for a year?
No, Andrew Wilkinson has made very clear that that's not going to happen.
Okay, thank you. Next, about funding for schools. Apparently the BC NDP promises another $3 billion a year for BC schools and hospitals if elected. Will university and school districts thrive under a new BC Liberal government?
For sure. One major item in the platform was, and I don't have it in front of me as far as the billions, but it is an infrastructure. We need to get British Columbia moving, and we need to get people working, and big ticket items like infrastructure, and that means transportation infrastructure, transit, hospitals and schools is really, really important. So I think you're going to be seeing more of that. I mentioned my record with regards to the healthcare field, as well as Capilano University. You didn't talk specifically about post-secondary, but K to 12, but you can be assured that all of the schools that are now getting built and refurbished were built or are getting built under the BC Liberal government. So, and I know that because I was on school district, and they're throughout the region, North Vancouver City and North Vancouver District. But you can be assured that a commitment in education and healthcare is going to continue.
Thank you. We have a follow-up from the question from CTV. The follow-up is, we're wondering what your reaction to Andrew Wilkinson's harsh comments about you today were.
Well, I can't speak for Andrew. Obviously, I was disappointed, but I can't speak for him as well. I mean, I just have to concentrate on what I can do and what I can say. And as I said, I was devastated. I'm sorry. As I said, I apologize to Bowen and to yourself, and it was all wrong. But I can commit to doing things better, and I'm moving forward. I've got to move forward and concentrate on what needs to be done.
Thank you. We'll move on to a different topic for now. The BC Liberals have committed to extending the reach of the Sexual Violence and Misconduct Act, which currently applies only to post-secondary institutions, to apply to all of government. This is a much needed change. How quickly would a BC Liberal government make this change?
I don't know. I don't know how long that would take. I mean, obviously, if elected, I would fight for it to happen, as soon as possible. So, yeah, I mean, as I've mentioned before, I'm a huge advocate of trying to get more services for sexual assault victims, and also on the preventative end as well. And that's why I talked about the putting consent part of the curriculum in elementary school. So for sure, we would be working on that quickly, and depending on who the minister, if we were a government, depending on the minister, then obviously I would be knocking at their door shortly after the election and say, let's get on with it.
Great, thank you. I'll throw it over to Josh for another question.
Thank you. We're going back to post-secondary for this question. So the BC Liberals platform includes $200 million in new capital investments for post-secondary institutions over the next 3 years. Do you have an indication of how that new funding would be directed?
I do not at this particular point. Obviously for me, I would be advocating for Capilano University, because Capilano University is in my riding. So I would be, again, at the post-secondary minister's door and advocating for what you need. And I think one of the main things is getting that student housing on site. And that's what's being told to me, is that's the number one thing that they need on an infrastructure perspective. And there's a few plans that have been discussed. But yeah, you can be assured, if I was reelected, that I would be definitely advocating for those funds, or at least a portion of those funds, to become to Capilano University.
Great, thank you so much for that answer. I'm just trying to scroll through. So talking a little bit about the PST elimination. So this question says, I was interested to hear about the potential elimination of PST for 1 year and then its continual reduction thereafter. Thank you for sharing that. What consistently hampers my budgeting efforts as someone with a relatively small income as a student is the misrepresentation on store shelf prices that don't account for the true and accurate cost of goods. How do you justify the continuous systematic deception to consumers? I'm wondering here if the attendees pointing to some of the extended and invisible costs to products that we don't see kind of accounted for in there, such as subsidies which lower their price. We can ask for follow-up if that's not clear though either.
Are you wanting me to comment, or are you waiting for somebody else to comment?
Sorry, you can go right ahead.
Yeah, I don't really know what to say about that, but I totally agree with you that, and in some provinces, I believe what you see on the shelf is what you pay. So it's a matter of disclosing that. And I think that's fair and something that we could consider. The whole idea of the PST getting eliminated during the first year is to pump up the economy and to ensure that people have got more money in their pockets. The average family of 60,000 will save $1,700 on that alone, and to get people spending again. And when they're spending again, I mentioned small businesses, then that helps to drive the economy, but it also helps to keep those jobs that those small businesses are providing for the community. So I think it's a win-win to get the PST down. And with regards to your other question, I'll definitely look into it.
Great, thank you for that. Switching gears again to environment this time. This question, under the previous government, fossil fuel subsidies have increased by around 72% to be almost $1 billion. Would a BC Liberal government commit to reducing fossil fuel subsidies to industries that destroy our environment and commit to a greener future?
We definitely will commit to a greener future. That is absolutely a commitment. The BC Liberals will reestablish BC as a climate leader. We had the carbon tax originally way back in, I think it was Gordon Campbell in 2008, before my time, which was slammed by the NDP and other parties. But subsequently they have adopted it with gumption. And I think what the issue is with that is that we had the BC Liberals had previously made it as revenue neutral. So any increase in carbon tax would be made up in a reduction in tax in other avenues. But the other option is to ensure that the carbon tax revenues actually go to green initiatives. And I know that only 25% right now of this government, the NDP government, actually go into green initiatives. The rest just goes into general revenue. So we need to concentrate on making sure that any carbon tax revenue goes into green initiatives. The other thing that's in the platform that you'll see is a BC Liberal government would encourage the retrofitting of homes and businesses. More electric vehicle charging stations. I have an electric vehicle. I also have an electric bike that I just started riding. So I am walking the talk at this point about that. Ensure a comprehensive greenhouse gas strategy that reduces emissions while enabling our world-leading sustainable resource development and indigenous land use, and to improve the provincial building code to maximize energy efficiency in a way that respects communities' unique geography and avoids imposing one-size-fits-all costs with minimal environmental benefits. So I'll leave it to you to look at the rest of the platform. But I think that there's a significant effort to put British Columbia on the map again with regards to our climate policy and our environmental policies.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that response, Jane. I'm going to throw it back to Grace for our final question, and then we can go for some closing statements.
Great, thank you. Our last question has to do again with the PST. And the question is, how would the BC Liberal government intend to fund public services like post-secondary education and do things like reduce the costs that are passed on to students through tuition and fees, while simultaneously reducing revenue by eliminating the PST free?
I'm really impressed with that question, because it shows that the students are, looking at the financial health of our province, which is absolutely paramount. What Andrew Wilkinson has said is that there would be no cuts to the services that we previously talked about, and that because we're in a wartime economy because of COVID, now is not the time for austerity. So I think the ability to cut the PST, that, as I mentioned before, will stimulate the economy, maintain or increase jobs with small businesses in the tourism and hospitality sectors, like these sorts of initiatives that are not just a handout, but are incentives for people to spend more because they're saving more, is going to help save the economy in the long run. So austerity isn't in the package at this particular point, but we're wanting to boost the economy, and it's a bold move.
Great, thank you. That was our last question for you. So I'm gonna throw it back to you, Jane, for some closing remarks if you'd like to make any. And other than that, we will wrap up the session at that point. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you, and very holistic questions that you have asked, and giving me the opportunity to clarify and once again apologize for my remarks at that roast. But I hope that my record in the riding of delivering for the riding, as well as infrastructure projects, the highway interchange, obviously, the hospitals that we mentioned, the schools that we mentioned, but as well as policies and programs and services for LGBTQ students and for sexual assault victims, and that I mentioned before specifically, as well as supporting more women in politics. As I said, I've been a mentor to many young women, either in the being elected or working for a politician, and I will continue to do so and continue to listen to my own daughters and my son, as well as my staff and volunteers on my campaign and in my office, and learn from young people's perspectives and drive my advocacy within our caucus and, if elected, government to better serve young people.
Great, thank you. Josh, do you have any closing remarks for everybody?
Sure. Yeah, just thank you again, everyone, for joining us. And thank you, Jane, for taking the time today. It's been a pleasure to meet with all of the candidates of North Vancouver Seymour. It's been really interesting kind of hearing from each candidate what they're going to do for students, for the riding. And best of luck, Jane, as you continue on with the rest of your campaign. And we'll see what happens on October 24th.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Bye now.